Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB.
We'll be breaking down some of our favorite movies and TV shows as they relate to mental health, self-healing, and overall wellness, while also breaking stigmas, shedding light on misinterpretations, and helping you understand yourself a little better.
If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Mental Health Multiverse. Today, if you are not watching on YouTube and you can't see, I am wearing some merch that might give you some hints as to who we're talking about today. And then for the people who aren't watching on YouTube, I'm wearing a Lilo dress and a Stitch hat, and I have a little Scrump plushie here. So if that does not give you any hints, we are talking about Lilo and Nani from Lilo and Stitch. Which I'm very, very excited about because I love this movie so much. So much.
You're very cute.
Thanks. So a quick little synopsis for people who haven't watched it recently, which if you haven't, like, what are you doing with your life? Or if you haven't seen it before, the movie's been out since 2002. So you have had plenty of time and this should not be a spoiler. But thanks to Google, a little synopsis.
This movie is old enough to drink.
That's a scary thought. That means we're so old. Wait, that means my brother's old enough to drink.
Didn't you know that? Weren't you gonna take him for a drink or something at some point?
Yeah, you think I would have. This would not be a shock to me every single time. Like every year he gets older, I'm like, how are you so old? You're my baby brother. Stop it. And then I see him in person and I'm like, you are a man. This is weird. So a little synopsis, thanks to Google, is Lilo and Stitch is a tale of a young girl's close encounter with the galaxy's most wanted extraterrestrial. Lilo is a lonely Hawaiian girl who adopts a small, ugly, quote-unquote dog who she names Stitch. Stitch would be the perfect pet if he weren't, in reality, a genetic experiment who has escaped from an alien planet and crash landed on Earth. But through her love, faith, and unwavering belief in Ohana, the Hawaiian concept of family, Lilo helps unlock Stitch's heart and gives him the ability to care for someone else.
So sweet. Yes. And they left out the fact that Stitch is like literally programmed for destruction. So
yes, like that is his coding, which is a really interesting concept that we'll kind of talk about, especially in the realm of like mental health and healing and growing and changing. But something that this synopsis left out is Nani, who plays like a super integral role in the movie and in Lilo's life, because I think what's also important is noting that, like, I want to say like right before, I don't know the exact timing of it all, but before the movie starts, Lilo's parents have died and now Nani has to kind of step up to the role of caregiver, and on top of juggling like trying to care for Lilo, also trying to take care of herself and like support them and all of that. They have child protective services like breathing down their necks and like threatening to take Lilo away, and it's a whole thing. But luckily, Nani also has support with the community. It sounds like a lot of people know her and know the family. Like when she goes job searching, they're like, "Oh, Nani, how's it going?" And of course, David, who is a friend but also has like a huge crush on her, and I think he is so sweet. And I know he's not technically a Disney prince, but to me, he is one of the best like Disney men in the Disney universe.
yeah, I was gonna say Disney himbo, but he's not dumb. He's actually like really helpful.
He was really helpful. Although there's that part where they're at the restaurant and he just caught on fire on stage, and
yeah,
Lilo says something about how like she's read Nani's diary and she really likes his nice hair and butt or something, and he's like,
yeah, his butt, his fancy hair and his butt. Yeah. He's like, she thinks it's fancy.
So I love how he's surprised about the hair, but he's like totally confident. He's like, yeah, I got a nice butt. So like I said, the movie came out in June of 2002, not a 2002. I'm pretty
you
sure
could say 2002.
Well, I could. In 2002.
Sounds
weird. That's so weird. I
Yes.
was in second grade then, and I'm pretty sure I saw it in theaters. Because as I've mentioned in almost every other episode, as a family, we had always gone to the movies, and I think I've seen every Disney movie in theaters, so, or more or less. And I feel like I did because around that same time, we adopted a dog, a pug. My We were trying to figure out names because when we got him, his name was like Vern or something, like really weird, like not a dog name. I don't know. And he like wasn't responding to it, but he was really, really smart. Like from a very, as soon as we got him, he was a very smart dog. So my dad was like, I don't know, what should we name him? Maybe we name him Stitch. And we were all like, yeah, Stitch, because we had just seen the movie, but he was not responding to that. Anyway, long story short, super side tangent that doesn't relate at all to the movie is my mom one day caught him basking in the sun outside. So she called him Sunny and his ears perked up and he like ran up to her. So
That's
I miss
cute.
that boy. I have always loved this movie. I love the soundtrack as like even as a kid, I loved the soundtrack. I thought Lilo was just like the cutest little button in the entire world. I thought it was just like a fun, cute story. And now as an adult, like I've learned more about it and the development of it. So I love like the cultural respect and appreciation that went into this movie. And it like really holds such a high standard in my mind for those kinds of things. And I also like that there isn't like a real villain. You know, it's not like good versus evil. It's something more nuanced that kind of touches on the complexities of life and grieving especially and family and so much more. So yeah, that's kind of my personal experience with the movie and some things that come to mind when I think about why I love the movie so much. What about you?
I love that. I was 12 when it came out, and I don't remember seeing this movie as a kid. Like, I don't know if I saw it in theaters. I might
Cool.
have. I know that I knew that it was like a thing because obviously, like, I think it was like when it came out at McDonald's, they had the toys. And I even think that we had like, I think they made little like dashboard like hula girls, but they were like Lilo instead of like
Oh.
an actual hula girl. So I
Mhm.
think I had one of those like my parents' car like when I was a kid just from like getting it at McDonald's. The thing is that I may have seen it and I just don't remember, but I feel like if you like rewatch something as an adult and then and you still like you're like I know I've seen this movie but I don't actually remember it, like this is one that I'm like I don't know that I've seen it and I don't remember it. So
Yeah.
but I watched it a couple years ago around Christmas with my family just because I knew that I had never seen it and I wanted to give it a shot. And I remember being like very pleasantly surprised with how like funny it was.
Mhm.
And how cute it was. And so again, like I kind of feel like I say a lot, like this is only my second time seeing it. So got to watch it through the lens of this podcast. But when I pulled it up on Disney Plus, I had no idea that there was so much more than just this movie. Like, there's a Lilo and Stitch 2, which I don't think
Mhm.
I knew about. There's a Stitch, the movie, that's apparently just about Stitch. There's a Leroy and Stitch. So you're gonna have to explain that to me. And there's a whole series. Like I was just
Yeah.
like, there's so much. I was very shocked. I really just had only ever thought about this movie. Yeah.
There's so much. It's great. And also two thoughts. The first being I love when we talk about movies that like I've watched religiously, but like you've only seen a couple of times because I think we bring a really nice balance, LOL Libras, to this because so much of obviously my perspective is like colored by nostalgia. And then you'll bring up something I'm like, oh, I've never thought of it like that before. So I think it's always really fun. And the second thing was that I feel like even if you hadn't seen the movie as a kid, you might have seen the like teasers and commercials for it because they did a really cool marketing thing where they put Stitch in like really iconic classic Disney movie parts. So like there's a clip of him crawling on the ceiling during Beauty and the Beast's dance. And he like breaks the
Uh,
chandelier and it comes crashing down on them. And then Little Mermaid when she's like singing to Eric and the wave comes up behind her or something and like Stitch is like pops up and starts surfing or something but like messes up her whole thing so she like flicks water at him and runs away or swims away. I'll have to find it. I know it's on YouTube, but I'll send it to you and I'll link it in the show notes. I just think so much of this movie is so cute. The movie's cute, the marketing was cute, the merch we're getting now, even just 20 years later, is adorable
yeah.
and cute. And it's
That's
definitely one of those like staples in the Disney
yeah.
universe for me anyway.
I wanted to bring that up too because the kids I babysit are obsessed with it as well. And I think it's kind of cool because there are things that I try to get them to watch and they're like, ugh, that looks so old. Like they won't watch Land Before Time, which really pisses me off because I'm like, that's the best, like it will traumatize you, but it's also the best movie ever. So like please watch it. But they're
Yeah.
like, it looks old. So at least this doesn't look old enough for them to like to push them to deter them from watching it. But I think it's funny that Stitch seems to be having a resurgence, and I don't know if it has anything to do with these other things. Like I didn't look up when any of these other things that I mentioned actually came out, but like Stitch is having a resurgence, and the little girl I babysit who is about to be 11 was telling me that like all of her friends have like Stitch backpacks and Stitch t-shirts and Stitch that, and she's like not as obsessed that she like wants anything Stitch, but also I was genuinely shocked. I was like, are kids your age into Lilo and Stitch right now? Like that's so weird to me because that movie came out 20 years ago. Like
I think it's just a testament to how well it holds up and how it's aged fairly well as far as
yeah,
I can remember. Um
yeah.
and so all of the things you mentioned, Lilo and Stitch 2, all of those were like just a couple years after the original movie came out. So it's not like it's relatively new, although I will say apparently there are rumors. I haven't checked it because I don't want it to be true. They're coming out with a live action Lilo and Stitch.
This
And
is true. It is
it
true. Yeah.
is. Mm.
There has been controversy about the casting,
Oh,
which I did do a little bit of research for. But yeah, so it is happening.
because the only thing I saw about it was like years ago, I think when the rumors first started coming out, and I saw like a concept art for the live action Stitch, and I was like, no one is asking for this. Please don't touch it.
Oh, yeah. So I think that is a rumor that whatever the concept art for the live action
Oh,
Stitch,
okay.
when it looked like terrifying, is that what you're talking about? Where it looked so scary?
Yes. He
Uh,
looks like an actual gremlin monster thing.
I found the article. It's on NBC. So
Mm.
Disney's casting of Lilo and Stitch character prompts colorism debate. Native Hawaiian fans say Disney has a track record of whitewashing characters, and they're not happy with the reimagining of Nani as a lighter-skinned biracial actor in the classic movie's upcoming adaptation. So they cast a woman named Sydney Audong, A-G Agud, I don't know, Agudong.
Mhm.
Not being indigenous or from a POC community, it may not be easy to see a problem with this casting, but within our communities, this is a big issue. Nani is indigenous Hawaiian with strong features and dark skin. This casting is blatant colorism. And Disney
Mm.
has not responded for. So it says that this actress is biracial. It doesn't say what her ethnicity is. So I'm assuming that she's part white and that's why people are upset. Um,
Mm.
uh,
I can see
and
why
yeah,
people
it
would be
doesn't
upset
say
about
what
that.
her.
Just because one, there was so much like cultural appreciation, and there's actually a deleted scene. There's something I was going to mention later, but I guess I can mention it now. There was a deleted scene that touched on how so many tourists and people will like either move or visit Hawaii and treat it like a playground, treat it like a tourist spot, and not really like respect the people or respect the land or respect the fact that like Hawaii has been colonized, and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And there was like literally a deleted scene in which all of these like tourists are asking Lilo like all of these questions about like where's the beach and where's this and where's that, and she like goes to the beach, and it's the tsunami warning like drill thing, but she's like, when that horn, in her typical Lilo way, she's like, when that horn goes off, that like aliens are coming or something like so dramatic, and like people are freaking out and screaming and running away. And she says something to Stitch about how like it wasn't always like this or something. And I part of me wishes they had kept it in, but I understand why they didn't, even though this is definitely an issue happening to this day of people treating Hawaii with so much disrespect and the people with so much disrespect, and like people moving there, and then people who have lived there, they're like the indigenous people not being able to afford to stay, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well,
So
and
I
I
can see
did,
why that's upsetting.
yeah, and I also did, I was doing other research just to see, because I'm not as familiar with how much care and anything like that that Disney put into it. So I was just like researching to see, and I found an article on the Mary Sue, which I kind of feel like it can be a little bit extreme. But there, apparently in 2020, when people didn't have anything better to do besides like deep dive with hot takes into things because we were all stuck at home,
Yeah.
apparently Lilo and Stitch became a big topic of conversation, for um not for what we're talking about specifically here, but for the portrayal of Lilo, and people basically calling her like an entitled brat and like all of this kind of stuff.
Oh.
And it's like, she's not entitled. She just went through a very traumatic experience and this is her acting out. But another thing that came up is that like it never says what year this is supposed to take place in and all of that. And so like people were speculating that because of their house, like the house that they were in, that it looked like it took place in the 70s, which I think is like makes absolutely no sense. There's a punch buggy in it. Like, and they're like, oh, well, that could have been in the 70s too. And I'm like, I guess, but also in 2002, punch buggies were a thing. And like
Right.
that joke about no punch buggy, no punchbacks is like a very 2002 joke, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so anyway, what the Mary Sue had to say about like this person who was kind of bringing up all of these issues with, and I put that in quotes, quote unquote, issues with Lilo and Stitch, is that like, no, this house looked the way that it did on purpose because they wanted, Disney or the creators wanted to show you that when a like what poverty looked like in Hawaii for people
Mm.
who couldn't like who were being pushed out because of tourists. Like this is,
Mm.
it's not that that it took place in the 70s. Their house looked like that because they were in poverty.
Yeah.
Um
And also I
which
think just like
yeah.
the mess and lack of upkeep is also like it also represents how Nani just like couldn't do it on her own, you know? And that's another thing we kind of touched on, but a theme definitely in this movie is like grief. Like you mentioned, Lila was not an entitled brat. She just lost her parents. And she already feels misunderstood by the people or like her friends, quote unquote her friends that aren't really her friends. But like she feels like she has
Yeah.
nobody, you know? And it's like her acting out is her trying to process these really hard feelings when she's just a child and doesn't really understand what these feelings are. But it's interesting that we get to see Lilo kind of processing these things, but Nani doesn't really get a chance to. Like Nani doesn't really have
Yeah.
time to grieve or process or act out because she has been launched into caregiver mode now. Like now she has to step up to the plate and become the quote unquote adult, even though she's, if I remember correctly, she's only 19. So,
Yeah.
and it's also important to remember that like she had a life, you know, too, that like someone, this is why I love the internet because I also like doing deep dives and things and getting fun facts. Someone pointed out that in the scene when Lilo and Stitch are trying to show like with the record player and how the music comes out of Stitch's mouth and we're in Nani's room. One fun fact, there's a Mulan poster right behind her. She has like a giant poster of Mulan, and I never noticed it until I was an adult, and I was like, "Oh my god, I love Nani so much." And two, she has a whole shelf of like surfing trophies, which makes us think that like she was a very proficient surfer. Maybe she was gonna go pro, but it was definitely like, you know, a big focus in her life. And then when her parents passed, like she kind of had to give up that dream. All of that to say, like, what was I saying?
That she, yeah, that she had a life before.
She had a life before and she's navigating so many different things. She has a lot on her plate between trying to get CPS off her back, take care of Lilo, take care of herself, take care of the household, and then like Stitch comes along and does not make things any easier to begin with. But
Yeah.
I just, even though she's not considered like a Disney princess, I do think in a lot of ways she's kind of a heroine, especially in this movie, because she's taking on a lot. She's processing and working through so much, and she's doing the best that she can, even though it definitely looks like one, she's not maybe doing a great job at it, but she's like trying. And what I love though, what I love so much about Nani is that she lets Lilo as much as possible just be a kid. And like
Yeah.
she doesn't judge her or shame her for her interests and like kind of quirky hobbies and stuff. And she might not be, and I think Lilo even says this, like she might not be a good quote unquote mom, but she is a really good sister. And what I love
Mm.
is that by the end of the movie they both come to realize that like that's what they need. Like Lilo doesn't need Nani to become the perfect parent. She just needs her to be a sister and be there for her. Um
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. What I was gonna say was going back to like Lilo acting out and
Mm-hmm.
and like when Stitch comes along, he like absolutely doesn't help. And I think Lilo has a line where she says something like, "You destroy everything you touch," like,
Mm-hmm.
which it's like right after she puts the lei around his neck, and then he just sort of like falls to the ground, like, what is happening? Uh, which I thought was so funny, but later in the movie she says, like, he's looking at the picture of her family, and she asks Stitch, like, what happened to your family? Like, what happened
Mm-hmm.
with yours? And then she says, I know that's why you wrecked things, and I know that's why you pushed me. And so it's like she recognizes herself too. And I think maybe by having Stitch as a pet, that's how she was able to recognize that. But she was like, yeah, he's on bad behavior because he doesn't know where his family is. Like he's
Yeah.
lost, he's alone. And I'm acting out in very like she just, it's like that was like a moment of realization for her, is like I lash out and act out too and have bad behavior because I'm upset that my parents are gone. So it's like
Yeah.
she recognized that in him as well.
The beauty of having pets sometimes is they teach you things you didn't realize about yourself. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And speaking about her hobbies and interests, what I love too about the opening like montage or whatever, or I guess not the opening montage because we start with Stitch getting like escaping basically and Jumbo being on trial, but I guess opening credit scene. I love how after Lilo gives Pudge a peanut butter sandwich, when she's dancing, how big her smile is and how she just like
Mm-hmm.
how happy she is. I really like that we get to see a kid be a kid, even though like obviously there are some sci-fi elements and some kind of like funny absurd things that happen, but I love that I don't know. She like Nani doesn't put any pressure on her to like pitch in or step up or like all of a sudden become an adult too. That she's trying really hard to just let her be a kid and process things the way that she needs to.
There is a little moment though where I think Nani is like quite clearly overwhelmed because the social worker is there to be like to be evaluating them.
Oh yeah.
And it's like after Nani's behind the social worker kind of trying to be like, say these things, yes, you could do it. And then she's
Yeah.
like, and she disciplines me. She disciplines me 5 times a day. She's got a pillowcase. She just starts like embellishing it with all of these things, and like it's so funny. It's so funny. But then you see how like angry it makes Nani, because obviously Nani is upset because that means that it's one step closer to having Lilo taken away, and Lilo doesn't realize that.
Yeah.
And she gets really upset with her and is like, why can't you just like be normal? I can't remember exactly what she says. It's not that, but it's just like
Yeah, where she's
they
like, "Do you want to get taken away?" And Lilo's like, "No." And Nani's like, "Then stop doing these things because you will." And I appreciate that she's kind of honest with her about it, you know. She's not like
yeah.
sugarcoating it or anything. She is like telling her the truth about what's happening. Question for you, because we are talking about Lilo and Nani because they're sisters, and I know we'll talk about sisters in our episode with Elsa and Anna, which is a very completely different sister relationship. But I'm curious,
Yeah.
like, what elements of their relationship, what
Mhm.
maybe is like similar or that you see you and your sister in
Yeah, I mean, like I got frustrated with my sister a lot when I was a teenager. So my sister is 6 years younger than me, and she will be on the Elsa and Anna episode. So keep an ear out for that, I guess. But but yeah, so like Hallie, my sister, a lot like I think her existence just kind of frustrated me when I was younger. Like she wasn't like particularly doing anything, but it's just like one of those things where like no matter what they do sometimes you're just like leave me alone, give me like you're in that space where you just want privacy and you just want to like
Yeah.
be and I think my sister was just sort of like would just pop in just to be like what kind of reaction is Heather gonna have today and yeah, because she wasn't like particularly annoying. We got along for the most part, but like I feel like we've talked about this before. I did like get like I have been we physically fought a lot. And so like we did put hands on each other a bit. And so I see I like I there are ways in which I became Hallie's caregiver early, but it's not in a way that my parents weren't there. Like my mom has always been there. My dad has had his issues, but like essentially was always kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
But we did go through some pretty what I can only call like traumatic experiences within our household. And I kind of was like a protective, like I was the protective big sister. Like as long as nothing happens to Hallie, like I used to like in her like she had bunk beds in her room and I had my own bedroom. But there was a point in time where I started sleeping in her room and I would read her Harry Potter every night before she went to bed. And it was a form of escapism for me. And it was I was hoping that it would also help
Mm-hmm.
her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a question I have not really asked her is like if she realizes that that's what I was doing. Uh, I think I would be successful if she never did. But uh but yeah, so it's like it's both of those it's like that both and too where it's like I just like I was protecting her but also she frustrated me. And I think that's the thing about having a sibling that is like that I think people who don't have siblings don't understand. Like the way
Yeah.
that I fight with Hallie, so my one of my friends has an older brother. So their relationship is very different than Hallie and mine because Hallie is my younger sister, right? And she's heard the way that Hallie and I talk to each other sometimes. And she's like, I would never recover if my brother spoke to me like that. And I was like, the thing is that it's like, it's just a thing. It's just like we got angry. We said a horrible thing, but then we're just like, everything's fine. And like, maybe not every relationship is like that. But with my sister, it's very much like, we scream at each other and then we're like, just needed to scream at you, we're fine now, like
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's all love. It's all
yeah, it's
love.
like that's just my relationship with her. We get really frustrated with each other very easily, and I think that just happens in family dynamics sometimes where you're like, especially because we don't live near each other, so we like see each other a couple times a year, and then we're like, oh god, why are you like this, and then it's like, but again, truly nothing but love at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
um so I think that like from an outside perspective, people look at my relationship with my sister at least and are kind of like in awe of like, how can all of this exist in one place?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
I know that your relationship with your brother is very different than mine with my
Mm-hmm.
sister.
Yeah. It's interesting though because my brother is also 6.5 years younger than me and very much in the same way as like Nani. Even though my parents were there, I was definitely like a caretaker for him. Like I think I mentioned this on an episode before, but almost every summer, my mom had us do these like workbooks so that she felt like we weren't getting stupid or something and we would be okay for the next grade or something. But when she couldn't buy the workbooks, like I would make a curriculum for him. So I would have like math worksheets and um like like decipher these words or find the bad spelling or circle the right word. I really should have become a teacher. Gosh. Anyway, um but so I definitely became this like caretaker and I actually was very resentful of him. And because not only that, my parents were still around, but he was definitely the favorite child. And he and I have talked about this actually kind of recently, is that he recognizes he was the favorite. Not that he like, not that he has anything to apologize for, and he didn't apologize, but there was definitely some like guilt around that. But also we kind of like laughed it off and played it off or whatever. But we're finally shifting away from me seeing him as, the only way I can put it, as a burden, and him seeing
Mm.
me as another authoritative figure. And now we're finally figuring out like the sibling dynamic of it all. Because I totally relate to Nani when like she's trying to get Lilo to understand that if you keep doing these things, you're going to get taken away. And I don't want that. I know you don't want that, but you keep doing this. And it's very frustrating. And they're both like screaming into their pillows. The thing I don't relate to is afterward when Nani goes into Lilo's room and is like, I'm sorry, here's some food. I just get angry because I'm scared, and she's like being really honest about that. And I never did that with my brother because we never had that modeled for us, which makes me feel like they had really good parents. And it breaks my heart even more that like they're gone and they had to go through this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of that to say, sibling dynamics are like so different in every one. Like it seems like you and Hallie are still very close and you guys talk a lot, and like my brother and I never really talk. I hope and I think that's changing as we're both figuring out like seeing each other in this new way and how we want to kind of navigate all of that. But there was definitely a period in my life where I just like didn't want anything to do with him because I was so resentful. I was resentful that he like felt like extra baggage. Like if I ever wanted to go hang out with friends, my mom, and this is when I was like really, really young and he was really, really young. Like maybe I was 12 and he was, I guess then 6 or 5 at the time. And I'd ask, if I could go hang out with my friends, and they'd be like, only if your brother comes along. And I'm like, what is my 5-year-old brother gonna do with my friend, like with me? Like, no. So then I just like wouldn't go hang out with my friends. And that led to like some other things. So I just saw him as like a burden, a thing in my way. And then I was resentful, I guess really not so much him, but of my parents for treating him better. And I know that like culturally this is a thing that happens in a lot of families where the eldest daughter is always treated so much differently than the baby boy basically. um
Mm-hmm.
and that's another thing that I'm trying to work toward if I ever have children, that like I don't want them to ever feel this way, where the daughter feels like they have to basically be their sibling's mom, because that's what it definitely felt like to me, but not even in the mom in like the nurturing way, just like the mom in the disciplining way or in the caregiving way. Because I remember, and I think I've mentioned this on an episode before, there was a day in the summer where my brother had like discovered video games, and so all he did was play Halo, and I had to clean the house, clean, like pick up after the dog, like do all of these chores and things, in which I started to feel like Cinderella, where like they were just telling me do this, do that, go clean, cook, do all the things while everyone else gets to like do their own thing and have fun, basically is the way I saw it. And one day my dad told me like, go clean your brother's room. And I was like, this was like the one of the very first times I talked back to my dad, and I was doing it like with tears. And I was like, why? Why do I have to clean his room when he's just playing video games? And my dad is like, because he's busy doing something. And I'm like, and I'm not trying, I don't get to have fun and I don't get to be busy doing something that I really enjoy while he gets to play video games. And I remember just being really like upset about that. And I harbored a lot of resentment for a really long time until I don't know when, until maybe I moved out and I didn't have to be around it anymore. But then I felt guilty
Yeah.
because I felt like I abandoned my brother and he became like their
Mm.
punching bag. And anyway, so it is very complicated. But all of that to say, I definitely see a lot of myself in Nani, which is why I guess I keep talking about her instead of Lilo. Um,
Mhm.
but I love both of them, and I think this movie does a really good job just with all of the different themes. I think they capture a sibling relationship so so well, in a way I hadn't really thought about before we started talking.
Yeah, no, it's pretty true. To focus on Lilo a little bit more, have you heard the theory? It's not canonically true because the creators didn't intentionally do this, But have you heard the headcanon that Lilo is autistic?
I feel like I've heard it in passing, but I haven't done any like research
Yeah.
into that myself. Interesting.
So it was in my research of just like looking up things about the movie that I found this article on Upworthy that basically says how Lilo from Lilo and Stitch became a neurodivergent icon. And it says while there appears to be no evidence that creators Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois intentionally I don't know intentionally made Lilo autistic, it is a widely accepted theory among fans, especially for those who are on the spectrum or believe themselves to be, that her neurodivergence is at least implied, which I thought was very interesting. Because I saw that relatively early on in my research, and I think it's interesting. Like I think that you can see something in a character and say like this speaks to me,
Yeah,
and like you can put part of yourself onto a character. So like I think it makes sense. Like if the creators say that she's not, she's probably not, right? But
yeah,
if there are aspects of her character that remind you of yourself and you are yourself autistic, then that's great that you can see yourself in her, you know?
totally. That's kind of
Um
that reminds me though of like people who see Mulan as like a bi icon, even though it's never been confirmed and it's not like outrightly stated. I think if you see
mhm.
something in a character that validates you or gives you some kind of like courage or strength or just something positive to pull from, I think that's great. Yeah, I have never thought of that for Lilo, but I can see it definitely, and I think that's really and just another little like thing to add on to the pile of reasons why I love this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of like things that we love, like we've kind of been going back and forth on both characters, but like we can
Mhm.
focus on Lilo and Nani and just say the things that we do really like about them and appreciate about them as strong female Disney leads.
I related to her on a personal level of feeling just like misunderstood or like too weird and not really having a lot of friends. Like that scene which we talked about right before recording when she has all of her like friends as sporks in the pickle jar and she's like, my friends have been misbehaving or my friends need to be punished. It reminded it like one, it's just first of all, it's a little strange, but second, it is really funny because it reminded me of when I would play with Barbies, and not that I ever like saw them as my friends or like did any voodoo where I was like, these are my friend spirits. But when I played with Barbies, it wasn't the traditional like let's dress up and have tea and blah 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 blah. But it was very much like I would pull their arms out of their shot, like they would go to war. I had Sailor Moon Barbies, so like the whole point was that they'd be in fights, they'd be in like battles or whatever, and
Yes.
they would like lose limbs or their hair would get chopped off. Although I never cut their hair because their hair was so beautiful. But I remember Sailor, for some reason, I really beat up on Sailor Venus. She had like a broken leg. She had like, I used to like color her with a red pen and she had like red.
She was your weird Barbie.
She was my weird Barbie. I wonder if I still have them in my parents' garage, but yeah, I think because again, when like you're a kid, you perceive the world in such a very interesting way. And so for some reason I just really beat up on this one and I feel really bad about it now. But all of that to say, I definitely so in that way I identify with Lilo. Although the like not having friends thing was mainly because like my parents would never let me go out and do anything. So I learned how to be very self-sufficient in that way to where like I would play I remember playing oh my gosh, do you remember that game Hi Ho Cheerio? It's like
Yeah.
yeah, the
All
one
the
with like
cherries.
the cherries and the buckets and you have to like I don't even remember the concept of the game, but you put the cherries in the little like holes and then you'd like pick them and put them in your baskets or whatever. I remember like playing that by myself. I played Monopoly by myself. Like
Wow.
I played a lot of board games by myself. And I feel like that's why I'm now really good at like strategy games. LOL. Not to toot my own horn. But when I saw Lilo and Stitch, I think I really identified with her because she just seemed to kind of be this like loner outcast, but also like okay with that. And then like finding friends in quote unquote other like weird things or people. Um, I
Yeah.
also just like how freaking cute she is.
She's so cute.
She's
She's
so
a
cute.
little nugget. The
She
littlest
is. She's a
nugget.
little nugget, and she's so creative and funny. And like I keep mentioning, and I've been mentioning, I just love that she's a kid. I love that she just
Yeah.
gets to be a kid, and is never judged or shamed for her hobbies and interests, no matter how weird or whatever quirky that they are. And I love that her doll, her version of a little dolly, is Scrump with its giant head that is gonna explode because of all the bugs in it.
Yeah, she made that herself, and it's just like it's so disturbing looking, right? Like it looks like a voodoo doll, and it's like
She
and
like made it
and
herself.
yeah, and her like her story behind why her doll's head is so big is just so morbid. It's like because the bugs laid eggs in its ears, and like it's just yeah, you're right. Like she is just so creative, and she's so like funny. Like she's everything that comes out of her mouth is hilarious. Like whether or not it, and it's obviously like completely unintentional. It's just like part of who
Yeah.
she is. Just like so funny. And a lot of her humor, I think, comes from being sweet and caring too. Because the things that she cares about are also weird and
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
And it's so it's like this doll was like foreshadowing how she was really gonna want to get Stitch at the what is that called? At the
The
pound?
pound.
At the
Yeah.
yeah.
The
She
shelter?
was really yeah, I was like, I don't know where they were. Like it was foreshadowing that she would pick Stitch. Although even though all the other animals were hiding because they were terrified of Stitch. Um like even if all the other dogs were visible to her, she still would have picked Stitch because she would have been like, he's different.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing that I really like about her is that like she is so sweet and kind and caring, but the things that she is sweet and kind and caring about are also a little bit weird and a bit off kilter, which I
Yeah.
can relate to. And I have one of the quotes, and I was going to save this for when we're talking about body image, but I think it makes sense to bring up here too, is that like I think this was meant as a joke, and I don't love that it's meant as a joke, but I think
Mm.
20 years ago, we've come a long way in 20 years. And not everyone probably caught this. You may not have caught this if you've only seen the movie once or twice, but um it's a part where she's talking about she needs more film for her camera because her camera's
Mm.
empty. And then you look at the wall and you see what she's taken pictures of. And she says, aren't they so beautiful? And the pictures on her wall are of very eclectic looking people or
Mm.
parts of their bodies. Like she has like zoomed in on someone who has a large stomach who's wearing a floaty, and I think it's the guy who keeps losing his ice cream who is also in a larger body, um
Yeah.
and like a larger woman in a swimsuit. And so like I thought for her that was a genuine, like she took pictures of these people who aren't traditionally societally considered beautiful and put them on her wall and says, aren't they beautiful? But I also think that Disney was trying to make some sort of joke to be like, aren't they
Mm.
beautiful? And then you look and you're kind of like, oh, she took pictures of a bunch of fat people, right? Like,
Right. Right. Yeah.
so I think Disney intended as a joke, but what I take from it is that like she saw beauty in these people, and I think that's really
Yeah.
special, like that she put them up on her wall. And like that's the kind of like she sees beauty in things that aren't traditionally considered beauty, which I really love about her as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Her mind is so beautiful and so amazing, because I love too how the narratives that she'll like the stories and the narratives that she'll make up, where, when Nani gets fired and Lilo's like, it's because your boss was a vampire, huh? She's like, yeah, he wanted me to join
Yes.
their cult of the undead, and I said no, and that's why he fired me. She's like, I knew it. Or like even like with Pudge, and I know a lot of this is like her trying to process her parents' death and stuff, but um even with Pudge being like, yeah, he controls the weather, duh, like that's why I have to give him a peanut butter sandwich so that the weather stays good, and whatever.
Yeah.
Like she's just she's just authentic to the core. I think that's like the main thing that I love about her, and I think what a lot of people can pull from and look to her as, I think especially like on an inner child healing journey, like please watch this
Yeah.
movie and like tap into your inner Lilo and not be afraid to be a little weird or different, or have whatever your interests or hobbies are, because I think she just does a really good job of being herself and not being afraid of people judging her or dismissing her or rejecting her. Like, even though as a kid that, yeah, that hurts, but as we come to find at the end of the movie, like she finds her people and like they love, and we say this almost every episode, but
Mhm.
they like your people will fully love and accept you for who you are and support your weirdness, basically, for lack of a better phrase. Because I love that
Yeah.
even though Nani's like, I don't get why you take pictures the way you do and of the things you do, but I'll keep buying you film, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I think like I related to with her was that like I think when I was younger, I tried to be friends with a lot of people who didn't want to be my friend. Um and
Mm-hmm.
like and I think that there's a part of me that's trying to recover from that and learn to like it's okay to be weird because like one thing that I've noticed that I've sort of changed about myself since I was younger is that I used to be really loud and I can still be really loud, but people used to tell me like Heather, be like quiet, you are so loud, like my laugh is really
Yeah.
loud. There's a lot about when I'm excited I get really loud, like there's a lot about me that is and can be loud. And so like I I think it was like in high school there was like a shift, or maybe it was middle school, there was like a shift when I sort of was like people will like me if I'm not as loud, like it's like very much like um and it translated into different, like my loudness translated in different ways because I would instead of like physically being loud, if I couldn't physically be loud, I would like dress really weird or really crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And like I used to wear calypso skirts to school. I used to be in dance and I went to a performing arts school, so I wasn't like that weird in terms of the way that I dressed because it was a performing arts school. But
Sure.
I would purposefully dress outside of the norm because I felt like that was my way of being loud without my voice being loud, if that makes sense. I used to dye my hair
Totally.
all the time. I had a wonderful mother who let me dye my hair, like at a pretty young age. But like, I chose other ways to be loud. But like now, I sort of think back to the ways in which that changed me, and I'm very like self-conscious of when I'm being quote unquote too much. Like, am I
Mm.
being too much right now? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that I sort of realized in this movie is like all of those people who I tried to be friends with who I was too much for, like they just weren't it. Like they weren't meant for this girl. And like who wants to be friends with that little redhead anyway? She was a brat and she
Yeah.
deserved those hands. She deserved the hands that Lilo threw in the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, you want to talk about an entitled brat? My goodness. And the thing that sucks too is I feel like they might have been her friends at one point, which is why she keeps trying to pursue them. But then when her
Yeah.
parents died and then she, was trying to process and became quote unquote different, that's when they like distanced themselves too. And that's
Hmm.
not cool. But I
Yeah.
agree. I
And I also like it. I've talked about throwing hands a lot in this episode. I want to let everyone know that I do not condone violence in any way, shape, or form. That if I'm coming off that way, like please don't take that away from this episode.
Right. Yeah. No, no, no. We be like Lilo in that be weird, be yourself, but don't throw hands, please. I love how at one point too the redhead's like, ew, she bit me.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I did used
yes.
to bite I did used to bite my sister too. We would bite each other.
Oh my
That's like
god.
that's what being siblings is like. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, it's crazy. Anyway, let's move on to talking about
Moving on.
Nani.
Nani. I mean, I feel like I've talked so much about her.
Yeah.
She's doing, I think she is the epitome of like you can do hard things, like you're handling a lot of hard things well, even if you don't feel like it. Because obviously she doesn't have like her parents to guide her or direct her. She had to do like a complete 180 with her life, or she thought it was going one way and now it's going another way. And I think she is doing the best that she can. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like I'm relating to that even at like, how old am I? I don't know, my late 20s, where I'm still like figuring things out. And I think Nani is obviously, she has a lot more things to figure out, but I think she's just doing a really good job. And I do wish we get to see more of her grieving process, because I think that would be really interesting. But I do think the movie's more focused on like inner child healing, and I think Lilo helps Nani do some of that too.
Yeah. I do like that kind of like brought up the scene of when they're surfing, and it's like one of the only moments that you kind of see just like everyone at peace for a
Yeah.
second. Like I thought that was really
Yeah.
beautiful. And then obviously things go to chaos really quickly, but that the whole scene, it's a long scene of like them doing their little surfing thing. Which I thought was it was just like a beautiful moment of them just being and not like working towards anything, not, the pressures, the grieving, like
Yeah.
it was just them living, and it felt really nice to see.
Ugh, it's
Um
such a beautiful scene.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think like I think Nani is like showing like it's like the epitome of what it feels like to be overwhelmed is like what I see in her as well. And like I think as someone who gets overwhelmed easily, and like, I think seeing a character be as overwhelmed as she is and sort of like almost fail, but then uh overcome, like, she didn't end up spoiler alert, she didn't end up losing Lilo in the
Right.
end. So and actually built like such a nice little family out of it. So as like someone who gets easily overwhelmed, it's like kind of nice to see a character who has overwhelm and how they deal with it, and what they're getting, and like how they get through it. And like it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be frustrated, it's okay to fail, because she does fail a couple times,
Yeah.
and like um always coming out on the other side. And there's a quote that really struck me that she says, I'm not going to say this is my favorite quote, but it did make me cry a lot. I think one of the reasons that it resonated with me is because I think it's true, even though it didn't end up being true for the sake of this story. So the
Mm.
quote is, sometimes you try your hardest, but things don't work out the way you want them to. Sometimes things have to change, and maybe sometimes they're for the better.
Mm.
And so I think that's a really beautiful quote about like, you can try really hard and things aren't going to work out. Sometimes things have to change, and it might not, and those changes might not feel right or feel good, but
Yeah.
they are for the better in the end. And like when she's saying that to Lilo, she means it as, I'm going to have to give you to the social worker because I can't take care of you. Like I think
Yeah.
you would be better off. This is a change that I think you would be better off with.
Right.
Um and in some cases maybe that's true. Like maybe she was too overwhelmed and she wouldn't have been able to continue taking care of Lilo. But so that aside, I think that quote is really powerful when you are going through changes in life, and like when you do need a reminder of like, yeah, I tried really hard to make this work and it's not. So I have to pivot and do something different, or close that door, or move on. And
Mm.
something better is in the future, something better is on the other side of that. So that's why that quote really resonated with me. But I am also glad that it ended up working out in the end, that
Yeah.
um, Nani is able to continue to take care of Lilo. However, maybe it is because some changes happened. Like they do have a little more help now, and they have created
Yeah.
this like tight knit little family. So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I do love that. I do love that scene actually as a whole, because you get a really sweet moment between Lilo and Nani, and Lilo is like really listening, I think, and they just hold each other, and it's so cute. And Lilo's just so tiny that like Nani picks her up with one arm, and I'm like, what? It's so cute. But speaking of Nani, because I know we talk a lot about body image on this, and we touched on it just a little bit ago, but I really love her animation. I love the way that she's drawn, She reminds me a lot of obviously like Moana, but she's
yeah,
not drawn in like your I feel like what heroines or Disney female characters have looked like up until that movie were like very like
yeah,
thinner and like very lithe and graceful or whatever, but she's not any of that. And in a
yeah,
very beautiful way.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about it that are both good and also like I'm not gonna say bad, but like can I commend them for making the changes that they made. However, they still stuck to more societal things. And then also I'm thinking about the fact that that Moana's animation seems also very similar to hers, where it's like they're both sort of drawn with like very thick legs. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what are we trying to say about people
Pacific
of this?
Islanders. Yeah.
Yes, like are we just like what is the message that you're trying to send here by animating two characters very similarly
Yeah.
in this style? I think that could potentially be a little problematic. I'm not gonna like speak more on it because
Yeah.
I don't think any of it is intentional, but like I do just kind of want to bring that up and be like, it might be a little problematic that these two characters are like, we're praising them for their animation and yet they are both of the same sort of Pacific Islander descent and are animated very similarly with
Yeah.
like very like thick legs is the way that I can put it. Like the bottom
Yeah.
half of their bodies are bigger than their top half.
Yeah.
And also both still have very thin waists and top halves. So they're like from head to like waist, we have like very traditional thin, and then like legs down is like all thickness. So I do think it's nice to see an animation where it's not traditional like how we have seen Disney heroines up until this point. Um, but I also don't think it's necessarily like a lot of people in that argument about this actress that I was telling you about the whitewashing are also
Mm,
upset because she is also very thin, which I can
mm,
understand being upset about because the controversy is that Nani is dark skin, dark hair, and curvy. And I wouldn't necessarily say that she's curvy. I would say that she's more like thin at the top and thick at the bottom. Like
mm.
um I which I guess could be a definition of curvy, but I do just think that like I think we have to be careful about the way we use the words that we use, because it's like she's not Nani is not in a larger body by any means. Like
Right.
she is consistently portrayed wearing clothing that
Her crop
drips like
tops.
drapes. She's wearing clothing that drapes beneath her hips, which I think like we can agree, anyone who
Mm.
has a stomach can agree that that like doesn't happen. Like you don't like
Yeah.
if you are actually in a larger body, like wearing clothes like that is not necessarily comfortable. Yeah, I can't speak for everyone because some people do like to have their tummies out. Not saying anything to that, but what I am saying is that like the way she's animated I don't think is necessarily deserves the praise that it gets, because she is still animated in a very traditional thin body. It is nice that she's got thick legs, but I don't think we need to praise that she's got like, give us a plus size, give us someone who's actually thick, you know, not just her
Yeah.
ankles.
Not just
Um
not just the thick thighs and thick legs. Yeah, I get that. Like to your point. And then I also know that there are a lot of people who do have her body that love that because they haven't seen that
yes,
kind of
and that's
representation
true.
before. Again, the
That's
both and.
also true. The both and I also think that I'm sure that you've seen this, and if you haven't I'll try to find it, but there are memes that go around about the lifeguard having hip dips.
Oh
um
yeah.
so it's like if it, and essentially it's like if the hot lifeguard in Lilo and Stitch can have hip dips, then so can you. And I do think that like that can be so comforting, like the fact that the animators chose to draw this lifeguard who had, and if you don't know what hip dips are, it's like say you're wearing a bathing suit, right?
Mhm.
And your immediate hips come out of the bathing suit, and then there's like a dip in, and then your legs kind of go back out. So that's what a hip dip is it's sort of like the outer hip, then there's a curve, and then your legs come back out. So that's like, if you don't know what it looks like, maybe you can Google a hip dip, I don't know, but anyway. So or just Google the hot lifeguard, Google for this meme, we'll put it somewhere. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I think that that's a lot of women are made to feel self-conscious about their hip dips, which like is very sad, and it sucks because like we all for the most part have them. It's just the shape of your body. And so I think that like if seeing that representation brings you comfort, that's great, but it's not going to bring comfort to everyone to see that, because again she is still very traditionally societally acceptably thin. So it's like what might bring comfort to some may still be like, yeah, but that's not, I don't see that, like that doesn't help me, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I have like not mixed feelings. I dislike because when I was in college and like figuring out, okay, this is gonna sound really weird, but bear with me, like figuring out my body. Because, well, like growing up, and I don't know, I haven't talked to like a therapist about this, but I feel like I should. Like growing up, my mom would tell me that I was like a size medium or large. And Heather, you have seen me in person. I am not.
You're tiny.
I am I am quite small.
You are
Um,
petite.
very petite. And it's taken me a really long time to like accept that. This is and if you've seen the Barbie movie, you know where I'm going with this, I think too. But it's so hard being a woman, especially like being on the internet being a woman, because every piece of media that can come up when we are intentional about the people that we follow and the things that we consume is how to make yourself more perfect or better in some kind of way. So for me in college, it was like, oh, I don't have a thigh gap. I'm going to work out to try and get a thigh gap. I don't have a thigh gap. I will
Mm,
never have a thigh gap. We shouldn't strive for thigh gaps. Or hip dips. Hip dips was like a big thing for me. I was a swimmer growing up, and I would see people with these like really amazing legs, and they didn't have like hip dips or anything. And so I would like look up like how to get rid of hip dips until I learned that like you have
you
them or you
can't.
don't. Yeah, it's not like
Yeah.
something you can get rid of or even get, because I know there are some people who are like, I wish I had them instead. And I'm like, now
Yes.
I
It
know
is
you
genetic.
can't.
It is absolutely genetic. Yeah.
Yeah. So this little body image tangent, all of that to say that like your body is your body. You can do all of the same things that another person does, and your body's going to look completely different, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. And I think just like we've been talking about with Lilo in accepting like your personality, I think also much like Nani, maybe even though they don't really touch on it, just accepting your body for where it is at this moment, and like recognizing the things that you can and can't change if you do or do not even want to make those changes. So anyway, just love yourself, be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, what you're saying about Nani. Like in her animation with the thicker body that she does have, like the thick legs and everything, is that like she is still wearing shorts and she is still wearing things that show. And I know that there are people who do have thicker bodies in that regard who are afraid to wear shorts and show off their legs. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like if seeing someone being so comfortable in their body the way that she is brings you comfort, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
like, hopefully you can find that same comfort too.
Yeah. I think a lot of what we're talking about too is belonging, because I think I also grew up in spaces with other girls who never felt very comfortable with themselves and always wanted to change. And it's not until like now as an adult that I have a friend group that's very supportive of each other in every aspect and aren't trying to like nitpick each other's either their own bodies or each other's bodies or anything like that. And I think belonging is a really really big theme, like belonging and family. Ohana, a really big theme of this movie, because I mean the whole movie really, the premise of it is because Lilo wants an angel. She wants a friend. She wants someone to be her friend. She wants someone that she feels like um will accept her, and she wants to be in spaces where she feels like she belongs. And I think that's they do a really good job of doing that. And I love too that they touch on family in both like your family of origin, so obviously like their family unit of mom, dad, sister, and then obviously the parents go away, and then having to figure out the family of their Ohana with Lilo and Nani, and then their Ohana with Stitch, and then with Jumba and Pleakley and Cobra Bubbles, and like by the end their family is it definitely fits. I feel like it fits Lilo so perfectly. It's so eclectic. It's so traditionally, or like I guess untraditional, right? And I love that, especially as someone who focuses more on their chosen family than their family of origin, how beautiful that can be, and how like sometimes it just fits better um
Yeah.
than anyone could have ever hoped for or dreamed.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot too. And I see it and I think like it's just so perfect the way that they all came together, and it shows that what we also talk about is like that found family um that like family doesn't have to be blood either. Like,
Yeah.
of course they are sisters. And the quote is really like, it's broken, but it's ours, which I think is like, you know, I think like broken can sometimes have like a negative connotation of like it's broken, which means I can't use it anymore, or I have to throw it away, or I have to, XYZ thing. But like in this scenario, it's like broken just means it's not like traditional, it's not like anyone else's family.
Yeah.
But it's ours.
I love his little quote. I think when he's talking to the oh, I don't know if she's like the prime minister or whatever, but she's like
The
the alien that's
general, like,
yeah, she's like coming back to take him to their alien planet or whatever. And he surprises everyone because he starts speaking very eloquently. And he's talking about his Ohana and how he learned what that is from Lilo and Nani. And Ohana means family. Family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. And he says, "This is my family. It's small and it's broken, but it's still good." And I'm tearing up just thinking about it because, like, I mean, my handle on Instagram is a little bit not broken, like, and it reminds me of that, like, I think it's like a Japanese um pottery thing where they'll fill cracks with like gold or something, you know?
yeah.
And I think that's just yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and I like you bringing up the general too, because what you said earlier about this movie that I hadn't really thought about before is that like there's no real villains. Like you feel like the social
Yeah.
worker, Cobra Bubbles, which like what a fantastic name. The social worker could be a villain because he keeps continually coming in and checking in, and he's the one who's going to take Lilo away, right? Or
Yeah.
the general alien could be the villain because she keeps checking in on Pleakley and what's his name and being like, "Do you have the subject yet?" Um, and so it's like you've got these two characters who could technically be considered villains, and then obviously the creator. What's the creator's name again? The
Chris
one who created
Sanders.
the Chris Sanders?
Mm-hmm.
No, not that creator.
Oh,
The
de
the
blood. Oh, Jumba, the scientist.
Jumba. Yeah, I'm like the one who created Stitch. Yes. So Jumba.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So you've got Jumba who like is kind of like a wild card the whole time. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is
Mad
gonna
literal
go.
mad scientist.
Yeah. But what you see at the end, I think, is that like everyone has changed in a way, or like, you know, everyone has sort of come together, and there's that moment that brings the whole movie full circle, because at the very beginning of the movie, the general asks Stitch, who is at the time being called 626,
Mm-hmm.
um uh like, if you show any signs of, I can't remember exactly what she says, but basically it's like, if you show signs that you're not gonna destroy
Just
everything,
destroy
that you
everything.
aren't,
Yeah.
yeah, if you are intelligent and you are gonna be good, like show us a sign. And then he just like can't, he just says something and we don't know what he says, right? He's like blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, oh, and some people
Yeah.
like throw up, and you're like, I don't know what he said. Someone tell us, someone do that research of what you think 626 said in that moment that like absolutely disturbed them all so much. But then to come full circle at the end when he's being so eloquent and talking about his family and everything, and then the general's like, yeah, I cannot possibly imprison you because you have shown that you're not destructive anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually just looked it up. I'm on a Reddit thread right now, but um apparently a couple different theories. One, they think he's talking about Elvis. Um
Ha!
a rough translation is Elvis makes dubstep bagpipe sound good. No, that can't be right. That's someone's trolling. Okay, I fell into the troll trap. Someone saying that it's because he says Miga Nalaquista, and people think it's I want to destroy. No, you know what? I'm gonna have to keep looking because I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll
if
we'll
anyone
try and find
knows,
the answer and drop it in the
um,
show notes, or you can email us and let
yeah,
us know.
yeah, or yeah, comment on any of our Facebook, on our, I almost said Facebook, Instagram posts about this episode. But Speaking of Elvis, I do think Elvis is a weird choice for Lilo to be obsessed with. I like that she brings him complete another joy, or he brings her complete another joy, and that she's like just so obsessed, and it
Yeah.
has to be like passed down from her father or something. But like
Yeah.
the more I learn about Elvis, the more I'm like, I don't like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think at the time, obviously again, we've talked about how this movie was made in 2002 and how at the time the things that we knew were not what they are now.
Yeah.
I think nowadays Lilo would not be obsessed with with Elvis, and she would not have forced Stitch to listen to Elvis or anything. But I do think that was I think it's a good choice for how weird she is. It's a bad choice for what we know now.
Yeah, exactly. And I did like the scene where Stitch was on the beach and dressed as Elvis and like did his little thing, and then everyone was like taking pictures of him, and then he got overcrowded and everything overwhelmed him. And I also think that is a good representation of neurodivergence as well, of like uh being
Overstimulated.
overstimulated. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Something that you mentioned was when he is in front of the council and she's like, tell us that there's something good in you. Show us that you're intelligent, is the theme of change and growth. Because Jumba says like his primary directive is just to destroy. Lilo mentions you destroy everything you touch. And then when they're at dinner, she makes him like that little diagram of like, this is your badness level. But I love everything that she has seen about him up until this point has just been bad. He like terrorizes the little San Francisco, I almost said San Francisco, the little San Francisco like model he makes. He like tears up her drawing, and whatever, has just been very destructive, but she still leaves so much room because she believes that there's good in him. And I think
Hmm.
that's so freaking sweet. And then yes, by the end of the movie he has become a little bit more self-aware, a little bit more emotional intelligent about himself and the people around him, and recognizes that he doesn't have that kind of like what we talked about with Merida about like fate and destiny, that like he doesn't have just one fate, which is like to be destructive, but he's learning that he can be so many different things. And like by the end he's making them breakfast and their lunches, and he's doing laundry, and he's like becoming their little housekeeper. And
Mm-hmm.
he's just very sweet and kind, and he really loves and cares about other people. So all of that to say, I think a lot of people, like I think we both experienced, we were told we were this kind of person, we were always going to be that kind of person, and either we just have to accept it and move on or whatever. And I think Stitch represents that you can be whoever you want to be. Basically, Lilo represents that, and learning how to control and manage those like impulses, because I think that's what it is at the end of the day, is like he has this impulse to destroy. And I think we talked about triggers last episode, and I think there are a lot of things that now as adults we are learning can be like patterns, habits, impulses, whatever, that we now are trying to control and manage and like break the cycle on, or just redirect them or make them work for us, not against us. So I really like that about the movie, about Stitch, and one of those themes.
Yeah, I like that a lot too.
Another theme we've obviously touched on, but haven't gone super super in depth, that I found a quote that I kind of wanted to bring up, is around the theme of grief. We talked about how Lilo is acting out, and I'll link this um article in the show notes. But I really like this quote, and I think it's really important to remember, especially about children, and especially about like ourselves if we haven't yet developed that emotional intelligence or self-awareness. But the article is from CBR, and it says many children who have suffered a loss early in life will act out at school because they're struggling to process the intense emotions they are feeling at such a young age. And Lilo obviously deals with this. She doesn't get along with her peers, and she cares so little about fitting in, she isolates herself even more. Her focus isn't so much on behaving normally to fit in with others as it is on remembering her parents and processing her trauma. And I think
Mm.
to something you said about like Nani feeling overwhelmed, or like what it means to be overstimulated, I think it's important to recognize that our bodies can only handle so much. And sometimes it's important to recognize the things that we can and can't carry in that moment and what we can and can't work on and process. So I think Lilo does a really good job of representing that her processing right now is just accepting maybe what's happened and figuring out what's going on. And her, like the quote said, like she's not focusing on trying to, I don't know, like get better, and she's not focusing on being accepted or having a lot of friends. She's just focusing on like trying to get through this really hard thing. um and as someone who's like finally coming out of survival mode from the last year or so, I definitely relate to that. And I think there's a lot to be said on how sometimes that is just important for some people, and how every healing journey is different, how every grieving process is different. And there is no timeline on when you should or shouldn't, I don't know, be in it, get out of it, whatever. I think, do what you have to do, and just trust that your your subconscious or your nervous system, your body knows when it's ready to handle the next thing. And it's okay to just kind of
Yeah.
focus on the thing right in front of you right now, and that's okay. Do you have a favorite character?
Wow. I don't know. I guess Nani would be my favorite character, or Lilo. I mean, they're both, I love them both for very different reasons, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's like really easy to be like, oh, I don't like Lilo because she's so bad, right? Like you just want to be like, she's such a naughty little girl. But like,
Yeah.
um, I was thinking about just like how genuine and sweet, and like for as bad she is, she's also as sweet, right? Like,
Yeah.
and just like how funny and kind. And so like it's like that all outweighs the like the ways in which she acts out and misbehaves. Um, and Nani for just like taking on what everything that she has to take on. Um, but I also really like what's his name? The little surfer guy. I mean, I
David.
think yeah,
Yeah.
he's just such a sweet little helper that like I don't think gets enough credit for like how much he kind of helped them in the movie.
Yeah.
He even saves Stitch at one point. Yeah.
He does. Yeah, I forgot to add him to their little family unit because I think it is really cute. They kind of have like Nani and David as like your traditional mom and dad role or whatever, and then Stitch and Lilo as the little kids, and then like Jumba and Pleakley are like the weird aunt and uncle, I feel like. And then Cobra Bubbles like a distant relative, like keeping an eye on them or something. But like, how cool is that to have Cobra Bubbles in your family unit? Like, that's just
Right?
so funny. I love
So
that.
funny.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like I can't pick a favorite, which is I feel like not
Yeah.
surprising for me, but I just think all of the characters are so cool, so funny, so well developed. If I had to pick, I think it's just Stitch, mainly because I have a lot of Stitch things. I think he is very cute and represents a fun misbehaving side that I have in all of my pets. Um and the quote that you mentioned from Nani, do you think that's your favorite from the movie?
Yeah, I mean, like, to be super like cliche, I think my real favorite is anytime they quote like Ohana means family in whatever
Yeah.
little iteration, like whoever says it, however they say it. And it's just kind of
Yeah.
like, I think that's just kind of cliche. I do think that the quote from Nani that I mentioned earlier about things not always working out, I think that really especially resonated with me today. So I think like maybe it's not my favorite, but it definitely like I think it's an important quote and that it really like resonated.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, there are actually so many cute little quotes from this movie.
I
And
really like when Lilo meets Cobra Bubbles for the first time. She's the one who points out that his name is Cobra because it's on his knuckles. And she just blurts out like, "Have you ever killed anybody?" And he was like, "That's a different time." Like
yeah, he's like, I can neither confirm nor deny, but maybe ask me at Thanksgiving. I think another one of my favorites is obviously the okay, I have two. Hang on. there are two quotes that I love that have like no deep meaning. And I think this is the first time where like one of my favorite quotes isn't like something super deep or whatever, but it's in the beginning when she's talking about why she was late and why she's wet. And she's like, we didn't have any peanut butter, so I had to go to the store and buy Pudge tuna. I mean, buy Pudge peanut butter. I can't feed him tuna. Do you know what tuna is? Fish. It's fish. I can't give Pudge tuna. I'd be an abomination. I love
Yeah.
that. And then I love when she's adopting Stitch and they're talking to the lady at the shelter and she's like, "What are you guys looking for today?" And Lilo's like, "A lobster." Donnie's like, "No, no. Are you Lolo? Do we have a lobster door? No. We have a doggy door. So we're getting a dog."
Yeah.
She's so
Their whole
freaking cute.
dynamic is pretty amazing. Yeah.
It is. It's so cute, and especially with the age difference. Again, another reason why I think I relate to them so much is feeling like there was such a big age difference between me and my brother. Um, but yeah, I think it's really cute, and I don't remember exactly if they touch on like the sisterhood Ohana aspect of um everything in the Lilo and Stitch 2 movie, but you should watch it just because Lilo is really cute and she and Stitch really develop like a I don't know. She processes a lot more of her grief and Stitch becomes even more like I guess humanized in a way. He just like learns more about like grief and the complexities of trauma and family and what it means to be like a good friend. So anyway, that was really
Huh.
cute.
Um,
I love the movie. I love everything that has come out of the movie. I remember watching the series as a kid. I don't remember it too well, but I also just really love Chris Sanders, who is the voice of and the creator of Stitch. And there are some behind the scenes things that I think I saw on TikTok that I'll try to find links for, but just the very very deep cultural appreciation that went into making this and the like the intention and and I don't know, just how carefully crafted all of this is. Just adds like a cherry on top to an already great movie.
I love that. I'm glad to know that because that's what I was trying to research when I found all this other all this other stuff that I found. You had a couple of fun facts, and I had a fun fact too that I don't know if it was part of like I don't know if it's a fun fact that you knew or if you just knew fun facts, but you mentioned earlier about the sort of like tourists that tourist scene being
Mm,
taken out.
mhm.
Another change that was made is that when Lilo is hiding from Nani because Nani's so angry about the social worker visit happening, um, originally in the 2002 movie, she's hiding in the dryer.
Yeah.
Um, and they changed that because a lot of parents were like, that is absolute like
Dangerous.
yeah, that's so dangerous to have a child hiding in a
Yeah.
dryer. So now it looks like a stove with like a pizza box or just like a cavern with a pizza box in front of it. But in the last scene where Stitch is doing laundry and stuff, you can see the original dryer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes for a continuity error in that way, but I mean, I get it. They don't want to promote
No, yeah,
children
of course.
being in a dryer,
Of
hiding in a dryer.
no, of
Um,
course. That was just like one not necessarily fun fact, but like a change that was
no,
made because of
that's a fun fact because
backlash.
I don't
Yeah.
think people knew. I think if people haven't seen the movie since they were children, since 2002 or whatever, they might not know that that change happened. So now, yeah, when you watch it on Disney Plus, it's no longer a dryer. It's a, I don't know what that is. I know it's like a pizza box covering a hole that Lilo's hiding in, and she like
Yeah.
pushes the pizza box down.
Like a
But
shelf that she shoved a pizza box in.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The only other fun facts I had really I will link the all of the deleted scenes. It's like 22 minutes of deleted scenes. One that shows the beach scene and all of that. But also this movie came out in June 2002. Um, they had to change. So there's the flight chase scene with the two ships in the mountains. Originally, that was going to be in like the downtown area with like skyscrapers scrapers and stuff. But post 9/11, they had to change it to make it a little bit more
Non-destructive.
yeah, yeah, because that was like super recent and um
Yeah. I'm glad they made that change.
I think so too. I think it just fit the theme or just like the movie as a whole. anyway.
Yeah.
I know I said it before, but the biggest fun fact that I love pointing out to people is that there is a poster of Mulan in Nani's room. So that makes me think that Nani's favorite princess was Mulan, and that makes me love Nani even more. And I'm trying to think if I know any other fun facts off the top of my head, but I can't think of them right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a good fun movie. Like I said, it's not really any good versus evil or whatever. It's a really beautiful story that touches on a lot of different complex things. Like, I mean, just Stitch himself, like if we could have done a whole episode just on Stitch and like the different complexities he has to go through of basically learning about like emotions that he kind of absorbs from Lilo and Nani and things. But yeah, I love this movie. This has been a very fun conversation. So for you, the listeners, if you have anything you want to share, if you know what the heck Stitch was saying, in front of the council, you can email us at mhm.thepodcast.com. No, mhm.thepodcast@gmail.com. That's all I got. Thanks, everybody.
Love it.
Yay!
Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Multiverse podcast and for spending time with us, HB and LB. Special shout out to our musical composer, Little HB.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating and review, or become an exclusive Patreon member to see bonus and additional content.
To stay up to date on all things MHM, you can follow us on Instagram at Heather Bodie and at littlebin_notbroken, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our faces and watch some fun bloopers. You can find all of these links in the show notes.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.